Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now guys, I was in two minds if I should start this video with Nzobu Enyiba Enyi, because that would have been quite appropriate, but then of course I've decided to park that because I know how easily triggered some of my Igbo followers are. So I'll leave that to one side and go straight to the story. So with that guys, I bring you this. Biafra, a court told to prosecute Obasanjo, Gowon others, determine whether Igbos should remain in Nigeria. So that's the headline. Biafra, court told to prosecute Obasanjo, Gowon others, determine whether Igbos should remain in Nigeria. So now let's find out what our Igbo brothers are agitating on this time around, or what latest move they are making this time around. A new group known as Customary Government of the Indigenous People of Biafra, CG IPOB, emerged on Wednesday and dragged former head of state General Yakub Gowon, retired, former President Olusegun Obasanjo, and Attorney General of the Federation to a federal high court sitting in Enugu. In a suit numbered FHC/EN/CS/103/2019, coming up on October the 2nd, 2019, the pro-Biafra group wants the court to decide on issues relating to self-determination, regional autonomy, and roles the respondents played during the Civil War referendum, amongst other things. The group also wants the court to determine issues bordering on the enforcement of rights of Biafrans in their lawful pursuit for self-determination, referendum, and right to establish an autonomous Biafran state within the Nigerian state as practiced by the courts in the United Kingdom. So now let's just pause there for a moment, because this is a slight departure from what we have always understood the Biafran project to mean, because the Biafran project, by wide understanding, had always been a successionist project. They want to secede from the Nigerian state, had always been their mantra. This had been their mantra for 60 years. They want to secede completely away from the Nigerian state to completely form a new independent state. But now this new group is going to court to have like a Scottish model. Scotland, of course, is part of the United Kingdom, even though it is a nation of itself. So now what this new lawsuit is now proposing is to have a Biafran sub-nation within a greater Nigerian structure. And now this is, of course, a departure from what we have always known as the Biafran agitation. How widespread this want is, though, how many people are converged behind this idea, I don't know, but this certainly is a departure from the norm, from our normal understanding, from our historical understanding of the Biafran agitation, which had always been to secede from the Nigerian state completely and form a standalone independent country. So we have to acknowledge that, because of course this is now a marked departure from what they have always said. So we carry on. The CG IPOB is led by Anambra-based lawyer Emeka Adolf Emekesiri. In an ex parte application, the group sought the leave of the court and jurisdiction to commence a suit against the defendants, who were ex-head of state, President of Nigeria, and Attorney General and Minister of Justice of Nigeria. In an originating summons, the plaintiff is praying the court to determine whether the instruction given to members of the claimants by President Muhammadu Buhari on March 5, 2016 on Al Jazeera television that it should organize themselves and vote to have a state within a state, which the group said it had accepted and complied with by organizing themselves, had created an obligation on the defendants, from which the defendants could no longer withdraw. So apparently, Buhari had gone on Al Jazeera television to set a task to this Biafran agitators to say, okay, go and organize yourself and then determine what you want. So this lawsuit now is leveraging off that Al Jazeera interview that Buhari did to say, okay, we have now done this and you can no longer now withdraw from what you said because you said it in a public fora. So now this is now what they are hinging this lawsuit on, as far as I'm able to gather. But let's carry on. The group also asked the court to determine whether by the instruction of the defendants, which the members of the CG IPOB had accepted and complied with as aforesaid, now had the right to conduct their referendum and vote to have its state of Biafra as a self-governing autonomous region within the Nigerian state, just like Scotland governs itself within the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Whether notwithstanding and in the absence of any directions, instructions, promises, or offers from the defendants, the applicants have the legal and inalienable right to self-determination pursuant of Article 19 to 25 of the African Charter on Human and People Rights, ratification and enforcement, etc. So it quotes all the relevant statutes, whether it is an offense and unlawful contrary to any provision of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 or of any other law whatsoever for the remnants of the Biafrans who survived the war with their descendants to identify themselves as Biafrans by indigenous identity and display their native flags and emblems and Biafran trademarks on their property and products as they do now, whilst remaining loyal to the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as Nigerian citizens. So what this is really speaking to is to embed a Biafran sub-nation within a Nigerian greater structure. This is really the narrative that has been described by this lawsuit and by this want, by this application, by this plea to the court, and they are leveraging some of the things that Buhari has said and earlier as statutes within the Constitution as was the buttressing of their point. So let's carry on. Whether it is lawful for the defendants to harass, molest, arrest, and detain the applicants for identifying themselves as Biafrans with their native emblems. Other things the group also want the court to decide are whether the amalgamation of the applicants with people of other ethnic nationalities in the south and north by the British government to form one country called Nigeria was with the consent and agreement of the indigenous people of the lands, and if the answer is in the negative, whether the order in council 1910 to 1913 made by the British government to create Nigeria in 1914 was null and void ab initio for lacking legitimacy, as it could not form the basis of the Nigerian constitution, thereby rendering the amalgamation invalid. Whether by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1963, which took effect on the 1st of October 1963 and remained in force until midnight 30th of September 1979, the defendants were right to seize and confiscate the assets, properties, money, and all the treasures belonging to members of the claimant by promulgating the Abandoned Property Act of 28 September 1979, whilst the 1963 Constitution was in force. Being more than 9 years after the war and after the declaration of one Nigeria, whilst regarding members of the claimants as Nigerian citizens but depriving them of their properties, monies, and assets. And if the answer is in the negative, whether the defendant are still justified to withhold the money, properties, and assets belonging to members of the claimant. Whether the defendant were justified to violate the international humanitarian law and the laws of war known as the Geneva Convention 1949, to which the defendant acceded to and ratified on the 20th of June 1961 by bombing the Biafran civilians, killing the Biafran civilians, and using starvation to kill the children, women, and the elderly of the civilian population of the indigenous people of Biafra in the war of 1967 to 1970 in order to win the war. Whether the right of self-determination provided under Articles 20 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights Ratification and Enforcement Act overrides and supersedes the provisions of Sections 1 and 2 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999, pursuant to the judiciary authority in the case of IGPV, ANPP, etc. So it cites cases to buttress that. Whether it is lawful for the defendants to marginalize, persecute, and discriminate against the claimant's region of the southeast and south-south of Nigeria by refusing to develop their region, refusing to revamp their seaports, refusing to dredge their River Niger and other inland rivers to the sea, and threatening to shut down or downgrade their international airport in Enugu. Whether it is lawful for the defendants to acquire a radio license and set up a radio station for the Fulani headsmen and pay them or offer to pay them the sum of 100 billion naira without doing the same thing for members of the claimants who are also Nigerian citizens, and if the answer is in the negative or affirmative, whether the defendants act in acquiring the said radio station for the Fulani headsmen and paying them or offering to pay them the sum of 100 billion naira without according the same favor or privilege to members of the claimant being equal citizens of the same country, constitutes a violation of Section 42(1)(b) of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 and therefore unlawful. Whether the defendant, by registering Nigeria as a member of the Organization of Islamic Country (OIC) in 1986 and licensing an Islamic Sharia bank in Nigeria under the 1999 Constitution contrary to Section 10 of the Constitution of Nigeria, have violated the Constitution and turned Nigeria into an Islamic country. And if the answer is in the affirmative, whether the members of the claimant have the right to dissociate themselves from the defendant and refuse to be called the citizens of an Islamic country in the exercise of their right to freedom of worship, freedom of association, and self-determination as a people. So now this is now the list of what this person has taken to court. So this apparently, seemingly, is a subgroup of that greater group of IPOB, because these ones now are now calling themselves, what are they calling themselves again? Let's just go to the top and see what they're calling themselves. Customary Government of the Indigenous People of Biafra. So CG IPOB is effectively what these elements are calling themselves, and their agitation is well articulated. At least we know what they want, and they have taken what they want to law. So of course they are not expecting any real thing from this lawsuit that they have filed, but filing the lawsuit is the first step. So they have taken this step now to go to the law courts first to say, okay, you, the law, use the Constitution that you say you are working under to determine this thing that aggrieves us. So they are taking their grievances to the law to say, okay, we are testing the law now. This is the law. This is our grievance, which is listed, and these are the elements within the law and the Constitution which we feel are being breached. And you are the custodian of the law. So you then use your custody to make a determination on all these counts that we have filed in front of you in terms of violation of our rights and violations of the Nigerian Constitution and violations of the African Charter and violations of fundamental human rights. So these are all things that have been listed and articulated and brought before a law court. So now this is now an opening step in what no doubt will be a long struggle for these people, but a right step of course has been taken. So they can take whatever judgment that they get off that, and we are all expecting of of course, for the court to just dismiss them. So they can take though the fact that they have taken this to court, and the court has made a determination as then the determinant to determine their next course of action. So progress report on IPOB now taken to law. I'm not quite sure what affiliation this group has with the Nnamdi Kanu movement, but certainly they've tagged on to the indigenous people of Biafra logo. So I'm not quite sure if they're a subgroup of that greater group, or they are just tagging on to that name because obviously that name transcends Nnamdi Kanu. But whatever your understanding of this group is and their intentions, come have a chat with me about that in the comment section. But before you come have that chat with me about this group and their intentions in the comment section, click on the red subscribe button so it turns gray. Bell button notifies you every time I drop a new video. Then come tell me what you are making of this goings on in the comment section. So I'll leave you here. Join you as ever in the comment section. But here I say peace.